Okay, I guess hello everybody. Welcome to Code Talk Teach, our temporary permanent name for our technology talk show. I am Kyle Cordes. All three of us work at Oasis Digital. You guys want to introduce?
Yeah, I'm Paul Spears.
And I'm Lance Finney.
So as usual, we talk about a few minor topics to give people time to show up for a few minutes, and then we get into a major topic. Our major topic of the day is going to be about finishing a project. Now, it remains to be seen if we can really deeply cover what it's like to finish a project within the scope of our time available. So we'll see how that part goes. Okay, so our first little, I guess, a warm-up topic. Your sound off over there on the monitor? Okay, great. Is the Apple event. So there is a much ballyhooed Apple event, I believe, yesterday. I am a 75% plus Mac user. Paul, aren't you like a 30% Mac user or something?
I use an iPad, and that's it.
I thought you have a Mac.
I had a long time ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you're a heavy iPad user. And
yeah.
Lance, are you at all an Apple user?
There might be one Apple device in the house.
But you're not personally. Okay. So the Apple event, the excitement was that they would introduce new Macs, like new high-end Macs powered by their new chips. And they didn't. And the Twitter crowd was very unhappy about that. I personally use, I guess, the top of the line Mac laptop as of 2019, which is pretty good, but the fans run a lot. So I am among the group. You know, if they bring out a high-end Mac laptop that doesn't have fans, that I would find that very worthwhile. Other than that, there's a bunch of OS upgrade stuff. I just don't follow enough to know, should I be excited about a new iOS version? I mean, I use Android, so.
I don't know. I'm still in that camp where I don't have anything against Apple products. It's just I don't see the value, the benefit that everyone proclaims is there as much, despite having used them off and on. Every time I use them, yeah, it's different. I wouldn't say it's better.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at my house, we're a bit of an odd case because I use an Apple laptop, but I don't use Apple anything else. But I have family members that use Windows on the desktop, but Apple on mobile. And at least between iPad and iOS, it's actually pretty great. The integration where it all just kind of seamlessly works together, it is pretty slick. So I see the appeal, but I've just gotten so accustomed to the infinite configurability of Android by comparison that I've even tried switching. Like when a family member was, what if I tried using this phone for a few days? I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't. The lack of knobs to make it do what I want was undoable.
Yeah.
I guess we have a commenter that.
So I would have not, had you said this 5-6 years ago,
yeah,
I would have thought you're crazy, but I've actually tried going in a completely third direction.
Oh, no.
And I've actually been trying to move all in on Microsoft for my personal stuff.
Wow.
Not even work stuff, personal stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I have. Bring in your Zune. I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to tell me it's finally the year of Linux on the desktop.
Yeah, no, I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, it is a little bit if you use Chromebooks because that's technically Linux.
My machine at work actually is a Chromebook, and I'm going to use that to transition to our next topic, which is ransomware. There was some big ransomware thing last week or something. That was which was it the pipeline one, or was it a different
pipeline
one? Yeah, so obviously I follow it closely. But then the big news today is that they got some of the money back.
Yeah, the Feds somehow seized the Bitcoin addresses. And
I have to think that behind the scenes that might mean they might be close to finding the people. And I guess my take on that is that it's all fun and games and it seems super anonymous until the Feds knock on your door, and then it gets really serious really fast. So I kind of wonder what we're going to see with this kind of going forward. Like if law enforcement is tracking people down, I wonder if we'll see a little less of it. I don't know. None of these is I wasn't affected by the gasoline one.
Right.
But I mean, I'm sure sooner or later something around here will be attacked in some way, right?
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. The price of Bitcoin dropped 7% almost immediately in response to that news.
So a viewer commented that Bitcoin is not as secure as promoted. I think just the people they didn't read what's on the tin. I mean, the whole point of Bitcoin, to my admittedly limited understanding, is that it's a public ledger.
Right.
And like you might hope to not have your address on the ledger traceable to your person, but there's absolutely nothing in Bitcoin that promises or offers you that it won't be somehow that address, that somebody couldn't use other means to figure out that whose address that is. And I would think if somebody wants to kind of get away with this kind of thing, they probably shouldn't use Bitcoin. They probably should try to find a way to demand money in a less trackable, less trackable form, right? But then again, the depth of my Bitcoin knowledge is that much. So,
Yeah, when you were saying before that it's all fun and games until the police show up. I've seen another version of that in that people have been doing Bitcoin trading and conversions between things, and then they get locked out of banks because it turns out that they were doing financial trading without licensing.
I saw that.
Yeah, I don't remember the details on it, but people using this are like recreating parts of the other economy, the standard economy, without realizing that, okay, now laws apply.
I read that one, and the upshot of that is if somebody is offering you a deal that seems too good to be true, then it's most likely money laundering is going on, and you are what they call the mule, which means they don't think too highly of you. So if somebody offers you something too good to be true, you probably should politely decline. I think that was the upshot of the story about that one. Any more about ransomware? We're not really ransomware experts here. But
You said you used Chrome to make that transition. You want to fill in the gap?
Yeah. So the thing I like about Chrome OS is that, as far as I can tell, I've read what various researchers have to say and so on, that although Chrome OS can be a little bit frustrating sometimes, it's because it's so locked down. It's generally the most locked down of any certainly widely available. If anything you could plausibly use as your desktop or laptop operating system, it's by far the most secure by default, by far. There have been cases where people are tricked into installing a Chrome add-on that, I think the add-ons cannot compromise the operating system, but they could compromise your browsing.
Right.
So I think that is the only channel. And I think they're hesitant to disable that channel because people just love their Chrome add-ons so much. I know that it's possible as the administrator of an organization, you can set it so that to log into your organization, a Chrome device has to be adminned by that organization. And then if you do that, you can flip another switch to say, here is an allowed list of known trusted add-ons. And then if you wanted to install one, you'd actually have to go to your administrator and lobby them, hey, I really want to install this one. And presumably an enterprise level administrator would be a lot more savvy about what add-on is more or less likely to be a scam. But I've also heard the advice if the question ever comes up, if anyone ever asks you, buy Chromebooks for your parents or grandparents because they're less likely to be hacked if that is their computer than any other type of computer.
And just the very nature of it, so long as the Google account itself isn't compromised, you throw away your Chromebook and you go buy another one and you have all of your access back.
I think even the power wash is pretty. I think it's impossible or nearly impossible to make a hack that survives a power wash. And so even an untrained user has a last-ditch way of returning their device to a known safe state. So here we go.
Well,
I have a commenter saying that you want to go ahead and put that last one up on the screen. I
was just going to say that the next generation lives in Chromebook. My kids, that's what they use all the time. My 12-year-old is over there watching videos because it's summer now, and what else would they do? So the next generation will live in Chrome, and so I don't know. When Matthew is 10 years from now and buys his own devices, will he buy Chromebook? Will he spend the more money for Apple or Windows? He might be Google for life. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really smart of Google to focus on the education market because of that phenomenon where people tend to use what they're already comfortable with, tend to buy what they're already comfortable with. So I said my work computer is a Chrome OS box. It's not a book; it's a box. And I just use the Linux container running inside it to do arbitrary development work when that comes up. Okay, well, I guess we should get to our main. Lance, do you want to do your other pre-topic?
Sure.
Your humble brag.
Yeah. So last week or so, we bought a new car. We bought a Chevy Bolt, an electric vehicle. So that was kind of fun. Basically, when everything locked down last year, we realized that we use maybe one car once a week, that we didn't need two cars. And so we had a 14-year-old Prius we got rid of. Well, now that I'm going back in the office occasionally, my wife is going to be going back to the office, it was time to get a new car. So we went electric, and we got the end of the model year for the 2021s. So they had huge discounts. And so I will never claim that my Bolt is as cool as Kyle's Tesla. If I were doing a road trip, I would like a cross-country road trip. I'd really, really rather do it in something that had access to the superchargers. But there's no way I could get a Tesla for the price that I got the Bolt. So,
like that's the practical car, right? Like it actually, like one thing I'm really super disappointed about is I like smallish, fastish hatchback cars are cool. I like those. And they're basically completely disappearing from the U.S. market at a rapid pace. The rest of the world still loves them, but this part of the world does not.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, there are some people that we.
I think it's very cool, Lance. Even if you don't, I think it's very cool.
Yeah, there's some people that we work with who are really, really into cars and have very, very fast cars and really care about that sort of thing. Yeah. And I have a very different relationship with automobiles. This is the most practical vehicle that I can purchase right now for myself and my family, and therefore it's the best vehicle. And I don't have to go to a gas station, and it's regenerative braking, and it's big enough for my kids, so everything's good.
So I, on the other hand, was thinking about going and getting my Tesla from the parking garage and bringing it around to the other side of the building to see if I could get it on our Wi-Fi so I could apply a software update. Yeah. I didn't get that far, but I thought about it. Okay, so we're 12 minutes in. We should get on to our real topic for the day, which is finishing a project. And so for people watching, if you look in the description of the YouTube, that has the same thing that we have in front of us, our sort of a initial rough list of sort of subtopics around finishing a project. So, in the spirit, I'll let you finish introducing it while I go grab some water to drink while we continue.
Yeah, so if you've been following along for the last few months now, you would have seen a couple of topics around like joining projects, about starting projects and how to do that in a healthy way. A lot of that with a lens through the consultant's view of it, because that's what we do. And we joked about, we're going to do a finishing a project one, much like consultants do, which is we just kind of go away and it never gets done. But that's not true. We're here. We're going to go ahead and finish this up. But we've got a lot of kind of subtopics around the idea of finishing, just because there's like so many different definitions and meanings and context, depending on all sorts of factors. And we're just going to dig in and start peeling those apart. So Lance, when I say finishing a project, what comes to mind for you?
What comes to mind for me first is that I've actually very rarely finished a project, in part because what does that mean? Usually I'm brought in on a project as part of a team where it is ongoing, and then when we're done, as a consultant, I'm done with it, but someone at the client continues working with it. The only time that I can think of when I was truly there at the end of the project was when the company I was working for was purchased so that the rival could shut down the application I was working on so it wouldn't destroy their customer base. So yeah, I was definitely there on the last day when that project existed, because that's when I was fired. But Aside from, yeah, that was a very
You're
difficult day.
scarred around project completion.
Yeah, that was a difficult day. It was other stories there about, like, I actually, the guy who fired me, one of the benefits of working for the company is you could stay at his second house in Arizona, and I had as an employee, and I was going there that night. So right after getting fired, I went to his house, and my teammates who were fired along with me were really wondering which pranks I was going to pull on that house. But I decided anyway, some of that is not suitable for this audience. Anyway, but yeah, in general, like, as a contractor, as a consultant, my job is not to finish projects. My job is to generally get projects up and running, get them in a good state, get the practices and the procedures in place so that the client can then continue it on their own. So that's the one thing I think of. The other thing I think of is, what do you mean by finish? Because you could say it's finished when 1.0 or 2 or 3 or whatever version goes out, but maybe finish means when the project is obsolete and no one needs it anymore.
Yeah, so one of the ideas floating in our notes here is the idea of, if you have kind of an epochal notion of development, then you might finish many times. Each time you ship a version, you're finishing. Or if you're doing some sort of iteration-based agile process, you might think of literally every single iteration as a kind of finishing. Paul, you had asked what comes to mind. The thing that comes to mind to me is really a lot closer to what Lance said, is that in a sense, a project is not finished until it's abandoned.
Well, yeah, what's interesting about that, like as I'm going through my head, playing over all the scenarios and things I've worked on, I have never finished a project by way of the user count of the software reduced to 0.
Okay.
That has never been a case for any of the projects I've ever worked on.
Okay.
And so, like, finish has included, like, just to like ramble off some initial talking points, finished has included, funding ran out, and so we can no longer continue to fund a project. The project was only ever meant to serve as a demo or a proof of concept.
Right.
It has
sometimes finish is just getting to a key demo to enable the next phase of a broader project, and then that's finished. And like, whatever bugs were there are irrelevant, right?
Sometimes finish is, okay, as the contractor, you did a great job setting up our architectural patterns and launching V1. Thanks for all your help. We've got it from here.
Yeah. If the purpose of Project X is to launch an effort, then the point of handover is from the point of view of that kickoff project has finished.
Yeah. One time it was finish was, okay, you've proved the concept, and we've joked about this on the show in the past, but okay, you've proved the concept that allowed me to actually dismantle this entire department within my organization. You've done your job well. Thanks for the help. Bye.
We have had things where we thought it felt like the beginning of a project, but it enabled some kind of goal within a political goal within a customer, to where we delivered the value they needed splendidly. They took it and ran with it, but from a developer point of view, it did not feel very finished, even though from their point of view, they were thrilled.
Right. And then there's other forms of finished have been, okay, we have a working thing, we've got users, it's deployed, but they're going to now just hire just a support team to kind of like handle calls from a client as they come up. Even our own internal things, like right now we have several products that we maintain, and they're kind of sitting in a weird pseudo done state.
Like, is our Angular curriculum finished?
That's a great question.
We've been using it with great effect to teach for many years. So you could argue that we finished it in 2014 or something. On the other hand,
we just, whenever we feel like bumping something up or feel like something needs to be changed, we go and do that, but then it can sit until the next release.
So I wonder if finish doesn't really mean anything. Maybe the answer to our question is finish has so many meanings that if you want to ask when something will be finished or if you've finished, you've got to say more than that, because
And then there's the difference between the project is finished and my role on the project is finished.
Definitely.
Yeah, and that actually lines pretty well with what I was going to ask, which isn't on the agenda, but like maybe it'd be easier to answer, like, what does it look like to finish poorly?
So I think
I've already given one example.
So I'm going to record this as notes, so like, failures to finish. So maybe after we hit more of the positives, we'll have to go back to talk about what some failures look like. Okay, so one of the ways to clarify this was, what does finishing or completion look like from different stakeholders' point of view? And so, right, we've hit on that in several ways. So one is, if you're brought in as, if your role is to kick off a project, then you've finished kind of at the very beginning of a project. Right. Another was, if you're brought in to like do some review and consultation, then like that kind of sub project is finished in a week. You have your final discussion, some kind of report, and it's over. What are some other stakeholders? I mean, I can talk about one. So a long time ago, I started a piece of software. Then I hired some people to help with it. The more we worked, the longer the list of open issues got. The more we did, it felt like the further we were away from finishing. Like if I would have looked at like the actual working scope versus the intended scope and took that percentage then I would argue the project actually got less finished with each passing month of work that went into it, which didn't feel great. But then we sold the company, including the software. And so from my point of view, it was finally finished. And it wasn't that it got from 18% to 100%. It's that somebody else wanted they wanted it, including the other 80% of ideas not yet fully realized. So so from the point of view of like kind of like a literal project owner, finishing can happen when that owner exits in some way. How about like in our corporate ones, where there's like a corporate sponsor? There's some executive in one of our customers who is sponsoring some project. What is finishing from their point of view?
Well, theirs was a project I have in mind in particular. Their idea of finishing was when they actually release the product to their clients and start generating revenue off of the effort.
And so would that mean that in a sense another project spins up if more features are needed in the future, but the initial project is finished? Is that?
Well, yeah, kind of that was how they perceived how the world works.
Here's a question. Is finishing the same as stopping? Like do you finish but then keep going?
I'm reminded of a joke from a Woody Allen and Diane Keaton movie from the 70s, Love and Death, where at one point Diane Keaton's character starts talking about all of these synonyms for, and I was complete, it was over, and like a full minute of all these synonyms for being done, and he said, "Oh, I see you went to finishing school." Anyway, yeah. Nice. Sorry, very reminded nice. Of the joke. What was the actual question?
The joke was so good, it's been lost. No, the idea is, what is the relationship between finishing and stopping?
Yeah.
Here we go. We have a commenter again. Thank you, Courtney Smith. Yeah, there's this great notion of sometimes when something is good enough, you just call it done, even if there's a long list of things you might do.
Right.
And so you definitely do not need to have implemented every idea to be finished.
Yeah.
How about bugs? Is some level of quality necessary for a thing to be considered finished? Like, can a thing be finished if you can't even execute it through its main use case because it fails?
Something can be over, but I wouldn't say that that's successfully finished. It's like our goal is to finish successfully. The goal is not to walk away in shame.
So does finish imply success? Like, let's say, going back to our car section from our pre-thing, if you there's a difference between finishing a race and like the race being over, and the race can be over and you can go home and you didn't finish. Like, that is a thing that can happen. In fact, at many races, many of the cars do not finish. So does finish say, yeah, in fact, I think we often colloquially would say, oh yeah, we never finished that project. the funding ran out, so we just we let it go. So maybe finished does imply success, some kind of success.
Well, and I think that actually goes back to the Woody Allen joke that finishing school, the idea of finishing school is it's almost like polishing. So that is one definition of the word finish, but there's also end. And so that, that's the pun. And that was the whole point of Woody Allen's joke there. And so I think we're trying to figure that out. When we talk about finishing, are we getting it to a fine finish or are we finished? And those are very different words.
Yeah. This reminds me a topic for definitely for another show, the notion that in our industry, we often use the word estimate when what the person asking for it actually wants is a commitment or a quote or a fixed bid.
Or guarantee.
A guarantee. And so there's this tendency to use words that are kind of on the same scale but have very different meanings semi-interchangeably. Like, this project is finished. Well, yeah, maybe we just stopped. Maybe it was never finished. Maybe there are projects will this show ever finish, or will we just eventually stop?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I actually ran into that problem with the overloading of the term estimate when talking with Paul a couple weeks ago, because my client is asking for an estimate, and he said that building an estimate is one of the services that our sister company provides, and then we can work with them to provide an estimate. And I wasn't sure if Paul was saying provide an estimate for the work or provide an estimate for a new contract to provide an estimate for the work. Which estimate are you talking about now, Paul?
That definitely should be another show. We're gonna have to definitely do a future show on
estimates.
And by the way, no estimate is provided on when that show might get scheduled and air.
Right.
Sorry. However, if you're disappointed with the lack of an estimate on when that will air, you may demand a full refund for what you paid to view the.
True.
Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
Let me propose that we try and kind of put the conversation on a little bit of guardrails by talking about what we mean at Oasis Digital when we discuss the idea of finishing a project with our clients. That does have a typical shape that we have in mind, that everyone kind of has in mind when we have that conversation with our clients.
I feel like the most mainstream meaning from that point of view is the project reaches a point, it can be deployed to its intended user base to fulfill its intended purpose. But there are many, many buts. Sometimes we're engaged only to do a kickoff,
right?
And then it has a totally different meaning.
Well, I would say that we can reduce that down to that for Oasis, the definition of finishing a project is that we have worked the project through to the minimum duration of of an initial contract, that we have provided the source code, we've provided sufficient documentation, and that the client is prepared to take that final product of source code and documentation and are equipped to carry that forward in whatever direction it looks like for them to carry it forward, whether that is to shelve it, use it for a political statement, use it for a proof of concept, use it as an initial kickoff. That's for them to decide.
Yeah, in a very deep way.
We've supported them in achieving that.
Yeah, like as consultants, because we are consultants. We do outsourced development, we do training, and so on. It's typically our customer's decision where they want to go, and we are happy to provide advice when asked as consultants, but it's often simply not our decision what finished means.
Right.
It's whoever's paying the bill's decision what finished means.
Yeah, but it does have that same shape of we've delivered the code, we've delivered the documentation, and we've delivered the support service in order to help you prepare to take this product and do with it what you need to do.
Think of that as if the finishing might be provide an agreed amount quantity of work and then provide the agreed deliverables, which are often those finishing may simply mean fulfilling what the contract said. I think I guess from a strictly business to business point of view, that is probably the best default. That's probably the best default meaning of finish is doing whatever you contracted to do. If I hire somebody to paint my house, they're finished when they painted all the rooms that they agreed they were going to paint, and they painted them the color they were going to paint. Then they're finished. Let me see here. So we talked about various stakeholders, and it seems like, obviously the ones relevant to our type of business there. So the next thing on our kind of weak sauce agenda is the notion of finishing a version versus the end of all development.
Yeah.
And this starts to step into the sort of a agile process a little bit. And I always at this point plug our friends at XPM, who are experts in both agile processes and tools to implement them. So go there for all of your agile and tooling needs. But in the agile iterative world, the idea is to have many small finishes, many small completions. Sometimes it's called like a release train, a series of releases that move towards some broader goal. And there could be many projects ongoing in a company, and each could be finishing an iteration every few weeks. And so you kind of, you have to be careful there, right? Like, is this feature done? Like, is this done? Is it finished? Well, do you mean, does it do what is planned for this iteration of this feature? Or does it do what the broader vision of the software being developed points at?
Well, and we can look at the Angular release history for examples of this. When Angular 2 came out, that was a big deal, and there was a lot of relief about Angular 2 is finished, but it was far from done, and they kept going. And when Ivy came out, Angular 10 or 11, whatever it was, there was so much release of finally Ivy is out and it's finished, but it's still not done. So there definitely are intermediate points where you have a sense of relief of completion. But if the project is ongoing, it doesn't mean it's over.
So kind of again, as consultants, we're normally assisting someone with their difficulties or their development in some existing much larger context. And so as many different customers as we serve, there are at least that many different variants on such a process, right? The kind of the part of the essence of agility is adjusting agility for what you need in your local context, in your local organization. So I don't think there's any single answer we can give to like what it means to finish a version versus like there's some organizations have iterations, versions, releases, and various other custom named things. And you could sort of think of each of those as being a form of finishing. Like if we go to pull some NPM package and I want version 3.2.4 of whatever, like, is that finished?
Well, 3.2, in that particular case, like 3.2.4 has a very definitive meaning.
Yeah.
And like if you get 3.2.5, like you're not getting 0.4 anymore, obviously.
Yeah.
And so in that case, 3.2.4 is finished.
So one thing that kind of reminds me of, and I don't know if this comes up quite as much in sort of more application or DevOps space we often work in, but for things that are explicitly versioned, in a sense, version N is finished when all of the little n.1, n.2 point release, when everything important enough to be in a point release has been done, and the bulk of work has now shifted to version n.1. I kind of think about like RxJS 6 is finished right now. Any really vital bug has been fixed one of the point releases, and almost all the work has shifted to RxJS 7. So RxJS 7, I guess it's finished in the sense that it's shipped, but it's still under active development. But RxJS 6 is definitely finished. If you adopt it today, like it has the API it's going to have, it has the features it's going to have, it has the size and shape it's going to have, and you're unlikely to discover any major new problems with it because it's been through that kind of finishing process of not just an initial .0 release, but it's been iterated on, and now it's finished. Is that a good meaning of finished?
I think it is another one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and yet another one is end of life.
Yeah. Speaking of AngularJS, I feel like AngularJS was finished 5 years ago, and it's only finally now reaching end of life.
Yeah.
Well, we still have clients that are asking us for help in and migrating.
Thank you for joining us, Courtney, who's stepping away. Yeah. I had been sort of surprised that, I guess in my mind, the big AngularJS to Angular transition happened several years ago, but definitely from the point of view, we have customers who have very important things still running on AngularJS.
So thinking about this from the perspective of our clients, we're always trying to figure out what relates to them, what's important to them, how can we better serve them, how can we do a better job of meeting their needs where they're at. Trying to put that hat on for a second. When they talk about being finished, what does it mean to them? And is there inherent value in helping them to reach that state? Or in general, was it more important to help them broaden their definition of the word finish?
I very often start with, what are your goals for this project? And I assume that whatever they say are the goals are some kind of completion criteria. But you're talking about not just drawing them out, but helping define them more clearly.
Yeah, and actually reaching that spot, because every time we start a contract, there's like all the words that are said, all the words that are written at the beginning. That is never the end of the story, ever. And whenever you actually get in there and you start the work, that's when you actually begin to discover what really needs to happen. That's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
And there's still an important concept where, I think most of the folks that have this, financial or political stake in having brought us in to do this work, they're being held accountable to someone.
Yeah.
And they need to be able to report progress and, check boxes that say, yes, we are on our way to success or completion or shipping or whatever that might be. But it's like you said, the closer we get to that point, the more surface area our projects gain, and the more we're able to communicate to them, look, here's all the things that weren't considered. How do we help either, again, redefine finish or drive to their notion of finish?
So I think that is what I had in mind when I added managing scope to the list of agenda items here. The idea of, what are the goals? Can we break those into epochs, into big sections, so that some set of them becomes possible to finish within some calculable, feasible, financially reasonable amount of time? And then all the other ideas are potential ideas for a future follow-on project. I think that sometimes facilitating those discussions is sometimes the highest value thing that can be done early in a project. Mm-hmm. is to move from, here are all the things that we kind of want, to here is a selected set that will define completion for this initial, or for this iteration, for this initial project.
Yeah, I'm always amazed when I look at software and some of the most wildly successful products that have the most polish and kind of a just overall appeal and use for the user are those that just exhibit extraordinary restraint.
Yes. Yeah.
Just laser focused on, we're going to finish one thing well. And we're going to take all the other ideas and put them in a bucket and never do them.
Yeah. And go pick 3 of them out next year. Right. And leave all the rest. Right. Not we're going to take the whole bucket and just dump all over everybody's desk all the time.
Twitter was a great example of this, and kind of continues to be an example of the extended story as well.
It's amazing how few features Twitter has for how many users it has and how many developers. You know that thousands of developers work on Twitter, and yet the feature set remains pretty small.
Yeah.
I like that restraint, I think, is a really important idea. If you don't have restraint, how are you ever going to have a defined scope that you can plausibly finish?
Yeah, and I think part of our challenge is not just it is in part having that restraint ourselves, because like there's a phrase I love to say, and it's that a designer is going to design and a developer is going to develop. Like if you just like give developers the reins, they're going to create something monstrous just because that's what you're paying them to do, is to develop things.
Monstrous seems like maybe fighting words, but scope does tend to just inevitably expand over time.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like the behavior that you'll see. Well, this meeting was scheduled for an hour, and so we're going to take an hour. Like, no, we were done after 20 minutes. Why are we still talking?
Unfortunately, more often I have meetings that go the other way. This meeting was going to take an hour, so the third hour is starting to get really long. I have a bit of I have a mea culpa on this idea of having that restraint. I'm pretty good at the managing scope part of it for features, but I just personally have a hard time leaving bugs unfixed. And it is hard to decide and agree that a thing is finished if it has significant known defects.
Well, and I would say that the developer is going to develop aspect is also like code quality. Like you could spend, weeks and weeks and weeks or months even, refactoring and refining and just rearranging the code base without adding any new features whatsoever.
Yeah. And
so there's
fixing bugs. I could argue for it if there's some bug fixing going on in there.
Well, there's some bug fixing, and then there's just the code quality. Hey, does this meet all the linting and hinting requirements? Does it pass all the tests? Do we have enough tests? Can we add more tests? Does it have the right project structure? And so even though the feature set could be done, you could still be going on with the code base.
There's a name for that, right? Which is technical debt. And I think that's closer to that bug thing. So when I wrote that item in the the outline, the agenda there, and I was thinking of like bugs, like things that directly affected the users in terms of delivering the intended functionality. But closely related is its cousin, technical debt. And so you feel bad as a developer if you leave technical debt while you're declaring this version of this project finished, because you know that whoever may or may not pick it up to create the next major version, the next major follow-on project, they're going to inherit the debt with the code, with the features. And you may need to decide to accept a degree of technical debt in order to call this version finished. Right?
Right.
Yeah. Now, in terms of how we help customers, right? So we certainly help identify technical debt. We very often are brought in to I'm trying to find the right word. We're often brought in where our first major effort or engagement is identify a bunch of the difficulties and then fix them as fast as possible. And this is part of the nature of consulting, is as a consultant, you're more likely to be called on a project where whoever's the project owner is not completely thrilled. Because if they were completely thrilled with what they're getting, what they're paying, and so on, they probably wouldn't
schedule budget.
But they probably wouldn't be calling consultants, right? So they're often pretty happy, but they're usually not entirely happy, or else you wouldn't be in the room. Okay, so I mentioned bugs. You mentioned, being willing to leave the stuff in the bucket. I mentioned a release train. And then, Paul, I see you have a note here about, connecting back to our clients. It's often our clients who have to have some definition of done. And so as consultants, we may give some input on what they might consider. Mm-hmm. Usually it's a client's decision of what intensity of bug is such a big bug that you can't be finished until that bug is fixed, mm-hmm. right?
Well, I also find that a surprising amount of time, like my role as consultant, architect, team lead, company liaison, kind of depending on exactly where I fit for that particular client, the responsibility of guarding the scope usually ends up as much my responsibility as my counterpart for the client.
Yeah.
Because it's real easy once you get in there and you've got a lot of high quality developers who have built a lot of software, have seen tons of features, have implemented tons of features, for them to go in and say, hey, have you considered X, Y, and Z? And the client rightfully hears good ideas and says that would be awesome.
Yeah, put that on the list.
And they end up, exactly. They put it on the list. And I find that I often have a role of kind of coming along them as their ally, say, look, there would be nothing, I would love nothing more than increasing the scope of this project by another 6 months.
Yeah.
That would be very great for my bottom line.
I would love that.
But and then going back and really digging in with them and helping them to understand, here's the trade-off of such a decision. Here's how it's going to affect the timeline, the ways it might affect the timeline. Going back to your comment on estimates. And here are the trade-offs. Like, we have a list of priorities here. You're more than welcome. You're free to change that list of priorities, but this is what you informed me it looks like to be done.
Yeah.
If you want to change the definition of done, I'm right there with you. But understand that if we're not guarding the gate on this, that we're moving that goalpost, and we're going to put getting done at risk.
One of the challenges in consulting on complex. So we consult on complex projects with complex problems for complex organizations. And one of the challenges, often there are multiple stakeholders, and they have overlapping but not identical visions for what a thing should do, which means they have overlapping but different definitions of done. And again, it's not our place to say this is the right answer, but it is our place to help, just help deal with this strain. And that strain sometimes takes the place of some overarching decision maker may want A, B, and C, and they would really prefer that A, B, and C be finished before other ideas are considered. But then people more on the ground, they want A, and they really do want B and C, but they really want help with D, E, and F. And they want those before attention is paid to B and C, which are the vision that came from the original engagement. And there's not a right answer to this. There's a wrong answer. The wrong answer is just pretend it doesn't happen and go run off in the corner. The closest we've seen to a right answer, I believe, is to just bring the issue up and just help the various stakeholders talk through it. And then, if, among the stakeholders that are part of a client, from our point of view, they will have to resolve among themselves this tension. Right. Sometimes I've seen groups of people pretty easily resolve it. I've seen cases where they have to sort of excuse themselves and kind of go have a fight with their boss's boss. And that's, I guess as long as they do that out of the room, it doesn't bother me too much. But it really can be a problem when finishing can become a point of contention if there are different people with different visions for what the most important endpoints are.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Lance, I know that you've had some pretty decent success recently at kind of finishing multiple rounds of projects and engagements with the same client.
Mm-hmm.
How has finishing looked in that regard for your projects lately?
Well, for this particular client that you're asking about, it's an internal application that has a pretty small user base. So we've had 2 rounds of success, and the very first round was essentially a proof of concept, and then the second round was, we're not even calling it production, we're calling it a pilot because it's only going to a few people. So we've had indefinite processes in order to go through and setting up the multiple deployment environments and figuring out all of those processes. Because this client also, at least the smaller the department we're working with has never done web apps before. So like a lot of the technology overall is new for them. So there's been a lot of that thing to set up, and then we got it out there and going, but we actually don't have a large user base yet telling us where the bugs are, because we just don't have a large user base yet. So that's a really unusual situation.
So you're saying that, so in this case, finishing was actually getting to a pilot, not to a full production.
Correct.
And so does this mean that there'll be some follow-up project based on the result of the pilot? This would lead to a new project which had its own new idea of what its goal was.
Yeah, essentially we're adding, so one route in the application was this pilot, and it proved the concepts and proved that their company could create this sort of application working with Oasis Digital. And now the next version is going to be something that will be more appealing to more of their internal users, and ideally will grow and be useful to everyone. But we didn't have a huge party or anything like that. Probably if
maybe we need to throw you on here.
We need parties,
release parties for our clients.
We totally need to release parties.
Well, actually, I think there might have been if there weren't this whole like pandemic thing and like no travel and the clients being across the country. Like I honestly do think that we might have had a let's get everyone together in the same place, sort of event, but just not the right time of humanity.
So it sounds like your client's definition of done really aligned well with your definition of done in that regard. Would you say that's true?
Like getting to pilot, right?
Yeah. We had a definition. It was supposed to have happened. Initially, the pilot was supposed to be the end of December. And then as we realized that the work was larger than that, it slipped by a few months, and there was grumbling, but it was acceptable. And we said, this is our goal, and we met the goal, and it was out there, and the pilot is out there. And now we're working on the next big thing for the application.
Do you think that like having that clear definition that everyone was kind of working towards, do you think that will kind of help in general, this project and others? Do you think having that, being able to declare that success, that has led to a healthier relationship with the client overall compared to projects that are more level of effort without defined kind of milestones or landing places?
I would say that it has been really useful for building a relationship and a trust base that, not just with the people that we work with on a daily or weekly basis, but also with the executives who come in every couple months to see how things are going, that we have had this success on something that is very important to those executives. That's going to pay dividends for continuing to build a relationship as we hit rocky patches, and that we know that we can trust each other to get through them.
So I think that notion of having like an agreed goal, knowing what finish means, is like it's either very important or even a necessary condition to have the sort of like, good relationship about how things are going, right? If the agreed goal is this has this set of features to go to pilot, and everyone knows that, the executives sponsoring all the way through every single person working on it, and it's pretty clear it hit that state, then you can have this good, warm relationship and feeling. What about cases, and I know this has happened on past clients who will not be named, but there have been cases where there has been disagreement more starkly between different people at our clients on what finishing means.
I can
do we have any advice for our fellow consultants on how to deal with that kind of strain when there's different, and again, past clients who shall not be named or identified in any way, but do we have general advice for our fellow consultants in the world in this kind of thing?
Yeah, I can talk through an example, a very strong example of that, but
if you can do it in a completely anonymous way.
Okay. So when I was working for a different company in a completely different technology.
A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Exactly. Joined a team a couple years into the project. It was a multi-year project, and the financing was coming from one division in a different part of the country. But the division that was based, co-located with where we were developing, were the people who were around available for us to be our on-site customer. And so we, even though Group A was paying the bills, Group B is who told us what to do. And so after several years, we said, we have a really successful project that does exactly what Group B wants us to do. Aren't you happy? Group A said, but we paid you to make something else. And then there was years of trying to figure out how to have this application be two different things at once. And it was never quite successful. There was even an effort within the company to try to reduce the number of applications, and they saw that these two like the application that Group A wanted us to replace and the application that we actually had written, they were seen as redundant, even though they had very different purposes. So in order to satisfy the upper executives' mandate for reducing the number of duplicate applications, at one point it was seriously considered, and it was as I was leaving, so I don't know if it was done, that they would replace the two applications. Well, they would ship the two applications behind a single icon that you clicked, and then it would pop up two options and you would choose which one you wanted, because on the desktop it would be one icon instead of two, and that would satisfy the executives' demands.
Like an incomplete solution to a rather deep problem.
Yeah, well,
so it seems like the implied advice by that is just try to make sure you understand the connection between who you're speaking with about what they want and their relationship to the executive sponsor. And I actually think that applies equally well working inside an organization as it does to people in the consulting world. I think that's generally very good advice.
Yeah, I got a situation that I was in where we had the executives that brought us in, the project manager who was guiding the efforts, and we had the team of developers that we were working with, and all three of them had a different degree of understanding about what was to be built, who was to be involved in which portions, how the responsibility was supposed to be divvied up. And then overall, there was a vacuum on what the definition of done was. They knew that they had a fixed timeline with which to ship something, but the people who were giving them this timeline were not actually delivering the specs for the something they needed to ship. And so they just knew that they were going to need our help to deliver as fast as we possibly could. That project straight up failed. And the one thing that I took from that project was, when you're in those scenarios where you don't have that clear direction and you have that sense of contention even amongst members of your client's team, that probably the most important thing at that point isn't about the actual development of the software. It's the development of the relationships within the organization.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, when you're in that scenario, you can't get the requirements. You can't possibly fulfill even, a handshake agreement level understanding about what's going to get done. At the end of the day, whether you realize it or not, what you were brought in to do was to solve the people problem they were having.
So there's a famous consultant, it's no longer with us, Jerry Weinberg, and one of his aphorisms about consulting is, however the problem is described, it's always a people problem. It doesn't matter whatever problem has been described, whatever it's technical, it's even if it's an obstacle of physics. No, it's always in the mix. It's always a people problem.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, that is the difference between a consultant and a developer.
Yeah.
Is that
work on this people problem also, not only on the
the
technical problem.
And that is easy to forget, when we're chasing the deadlines, when we're trying to reach finished.
Yeah.
That even if a project is finished, the relationships that we build, we should aim for those to not be finished. when they are healthy and and approachable relationships, because that's that's what the industry is actually built on, is the connections, those relationships, and being able to help our clients get connected with other people who can help them solve their problems. So
speaking of finished, are there any other key things we should hit before our show or our episode is finished? I think we've connected to everything on our initial agenda. We've talked quite a bit about various kinds of failure modes, which is an item we kind of added midstream. We've talked to, critical thing that should have been on the agenda is that regardless of whether you're a consultant or working inside a giant firm, like figure out who the executive sponsor is, who the customer is, whatever, and find out their definition of done. We've talked about that like a bunch of different ways. Is there anything we have missed around being finished?
Don't forget to celebrate.
Yeah.
Cake. We need cake.
Yeah, and in fact, I think that's actually a pretty major omission from my agenda up there, is that some kind of ritual, some celebration of finishing at whatever cadence makes sense in your context. Building the habit of both finishing and being happy about it is like that puts you in such a better place than most organizations and most developers. Yeah. So yeah, well, I can't think of anything better to end on unless anybody else has anything.
Yay!
Yay! Okay, we are finished.
Let's go get some cake.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you, later viewers, for watching.
All right.
You want to click us out?
Bye-bye.